Hey guys, how's it going? Michael Troy here. So excited to bring you this interview today. We are talking to one of my favorite artists and one of my favorite kinds of artists. He works in multiple media, always brings something fresh and exciting to the comic book scene. But he's not just a comic book artist and writer, a cartoonist, I like to say. He's also a film director and a man of many talents and hats. Thank you for talking with us, and please welcome Kaare Andrews. How are you?
Good, great, Michael.
Kari,
Thanks.
right? Kari,
Thanks for
right? Atari,
yeah,
right?
I put it right in my Zoom handle these days. It's the quickest, cleanest way to let people know how to say my name, which is
I love it. I think it's such a cool name. What is the origin of your name?
it's like an old Norwegian farmer's name, basically. So it's like the Norwegian equivalent of like being called Ezekiel or something like that. It's like, kind of an old Norwegian name.
Oh, okay, that's very cool. And now you're Canadian, correct?
Yeah, live in Canada, out here in Vancouver, suburbs of Vancouver.
Yes, I have a lifelong love of Canadians, and it's directly attributed to being a fan of Alpha Flight. So I think that's
Nice.
a perfect example of like the good that comics do, like for no other reason aside from I love Alpha Flight. And now actually my second biggest love of Canada is ketchup flavored potato chips.
Is yeah.
They're not a thing here in the States. It's so weird. Like, so whenever I have a friend from Canada go home to visit, like their mandate is to bring me a bag of those ketchup flavored potato chips. So
Yeah, no, they're good. They're good. I've eaten them since I was a kid. I always forget still. I think some places in the States had them, but most of the states did not have them growing up. But yeah, they're very delicious.
I feel like they've tried to do it a couple of times and it's always been like unsuccessful. I don't know why, but I tend to like things on the fringe anyway. So
Yeah.
Um, so I love your comic book art. It's funny because I always think of you as like a newer comic book artist, but I'm like, you've been around for quite some time by now. I mean, did you break into the industry like in the early 2000s?
Yeah, it's weird because I also think of myself as a brand new comic artist. I always feel like continually I have just started and but I did break in just before 2000. So my first work at Marvel and DC was 99, I think.
Oh, cool.
Marvel and Wildstorm.
Right,
Before DC bought Wildstorm. I kind of started off at Wildstorm and Marvel at the same time, around 99.
okay. I feel, what was your first work at Marvel? I feel like my first exposure to your work was Ultimate X-Men, maybe.
My first Marvel work was I drew half an issue of Gambit. Um, I forget the issue number, maybe 13 or something like that. It was the Steve Scroce run. I shared an issue with Charlie Adlard. So he drew half an issue and I drew half an issue. And that was my big break. And I was so excited and so ready. And I was like, just ready to finally show everyone what I could do. And one of the biggest lessons of my career was arriving at the comic book store and grabbing that issue and feeling so embarrassed and ashamed at the quality when it was printed and on the stands, because it's just such a jump from what you draw on a page to then it gets printed and you see it sterilized of your efforts. And it was just like, and it was like a real shock. And it was like, oh my God, I have to get better as quick as I can. That was a good lesson to learn very early in my career.
I was gonna say, what a great like learning experience, but it must have been gutting at the time because it's like you said, it's like you, on one hand you're so excited to see your first work in print, and especially on a Marvel comic book, and then you go and you're disappointed. But I mean, I love comic book art. I've been, I'm an artist myself, and I adamantly have like devoured interviews with comic book artists, trying to suck their essence or their process or stuff like that. And I feel like that's a very common thing, is like, especially since comic book art is drawn so much larger, that you do have to see it in print before, like, to learn what you're doing wrong and what works and
Yeah.
what doesn't work and things like that. So, but
And
they
not
print
just not just that, there's also the collaboration of like a penciler and an inker and a colorist, like maybe you're not communicating to the inker properly what you're trying to get out of it, or maybe that inker is just the wrong style for your style. And then the colors, maybe it's just some, like at the time there was a shop in, I think, Ireland that was doing all of Marvel's colors for real cheap and not a great result. Maybe you get stuck with like the, the junior guy at the sweatshop in Ireland or whatever, and that also started to drive me towards inking and coloring my own work as well, because that's something I knew how to do, but and I could have probably broken in sooner as a colorist because not a lot of people knew how to do it back then, or maybe even as an inker. But I thought it was so important to break in as a penciler first and then add those things. So I was able to do that pretty quickly. But half the reason was I could do it myself, and it was a shorter route to getting the result I wanted, rather than like trying to find the right ink. You find these inking teams, a lot of these guys like Art Adams and Terry Austin, or Jim Lee and Scott Williams, or you find these teams. I didn't have time. I didn't think I had time to find my teammate. I just wanted to. I just knew what I wanted, and I knew I could get there on my own. So I just immediately started driving as hard as I could towards inking my own work and coloring my own work as well.
So seeing the way it was printed was the main driving force for you wanting to take more control over the look and aesthetic of your art.
Well, seeing it printed was like, oh my gosh, I have to get better quick.
Yeah.
And then part of getting better was like, okay, I can get a better result if I had one of my old friends, Seth Fisher, who passed away a long time ago now, but we broke in kind of around the same time. And Seth Fisher is this amazing cartoonist. He kind of has a bit of a Jeff Darrow-esque kind of thing going on, but he was such a unique, caring guy. And he told me one day, Kaare, it's like it's not that you're the best penciler, it's not that you're the best inker, it's not that you're the best colorist. And say, oh, thanks, Seth. But then he said, he put it, but when you do all those things yourself, it's really something, or something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe that's just how I need to do it. Maybe I just need to do all those things. That was really one of the key to trying to do it all myself.
Well, it's sage words of advice. I mean, sometimes it is that sort of tough love that you need. And I have to say, I love Seth's art. Like a Weird World with Flash is amazing and big in Japan. And he has a lot of great work. So yeah, it was a big loss that he left us way too soon. I often think some of the brightest stars burn out faster than the rest of the other ones. So that's how I try to make peace with it anyway. But but then when did you, like, it's funny he should say that, because I was thinking, when an editor hires you, it's like they probably, like, it's like with the anticipation of excitement of really not knowing what you're going to get, because I feel like you just exploded in so many different directions, especially on your cover work. I mean, those Hulk covers are like iconic and so great. And so how did those Hulk covers and like the idea for like such a broad range of, like, I mean, you went from, Where the Wild Things Are to, Durango. Was the Durango homage the first cover?
That was my first Hulk cover. Yeah. So yeah, here's what's weird is, I mean, I think why I said earlier why I still think I'm brand new all the time is because I just still have such a hunger to like prove myself to people. And maybe that's a character flaw, but it's something I can use to fuel my art all the time. So I'm constantly obsessed with trying to do the new thing, the thing that will matter, the thing that will be the best thing I've done, the thing that will change the world. That, I'm constantly obsessed with that train of thought. And I think there's positives and negatives to that. The positive is there's a lot of energy and you can harness it and throw it on the art and just like obsess about it and just put your heart and soul. The negative is that you're constantly reinventing yourself. So it's like, there is a marketability in like being Porsche and selling only Porsche cars. And I've always been more interested in like well, why can't I, here's a Lamborghini, here's a Porsche, here's a bicycle, here's a skateboard. Like I want to just, I just have this weird need to like do all those things. So the covers were a great outlet for me to do those things. And here's what happened with the covers is I got offered, I think it was I did a Logan Grimm miniseries, which was written by Larry Hama, who wrote G.I. Joe. And I was so excited because I was such a G.I. Joe fan growing up. And it was like them as soldiers in World War II. And I was just, oh my goodness, I was so excited to draw that series. And another case of the printed results were so far away from what I wanted them to be. But, we got behind, everyone gets behind. And I offered to, how did it work? Somehow I convinced them to let me color my first cover myself. Walden Wong inked it. I penciled it, and I convinced them to let me color it. I think I convinced them because it would save them time. Because back in those days, you had to FedEx CD-ROMs to Marvel and to get your colors to them. You couldn't transfer colors over the internet like you can now. So every time I would pencil a cover, FedEx it to Marvel. They would FedEx it to the inker. He would FedEx it back to Marvel. They'd FedEx it to the colorist. The colorist would FedEx it back to Marvel. It was really like, oh my goodness, like FedEx was making so much money off of comic books back then. And I convinced them I could save time, I think, because I forget how it worked. I can't remember it. But anyways, they let me color the first issue, the cover. And then we got behind. You always get behind in comics. And I offered, hey, just to save time, I can pencil, ink, and color. I think it was the second cover, something like that. My memory's is fuzzy. And they said, sure. And so I was able to eliminate like 4 days of just straight shipping time, 4 days of straight FedExing, just by penciling, inking, and coloring myself, threw it back at them. And I think a little light went off, and some of the editors over there like, oh, when we're behind, we can get this Canadian over here. He can just do it all, and we'll save 4 days of straight shipping time. So I started getting a few covers just as like all-in deals. Like, hey, just pencil, ink, and color the covers. And I was offered a Spider-Man cover, and Spider-Man's like always been my favorite of the superheroes. And I just wanted to, again, I felt this desire, this weird urge just to like prove myself, just like, do the thing, like do the art thing, like change the world, like whatever. And I just felt this, I found that I had this real strong desire to paint. And I hadn't painted before, but I would buy these Spectrum art books. You probably know them, the Spectrum series. And I was always drawn to like kind of the oil paintings at the time. And I didn't have the money to buy oil paints, struggling artist, kind of drawing out of my mom's laundry room in her. I moved back home after art school, and my bedroom was given away to to someone else. So I was living in my mom's laundry room, but I had my little tablet, my little Wacom tablet, and it came with free painting software at the time, Corel Painter. And it worked well enough where I could kind of get an oil painted look. And so I didn't ask if I could do it. I didn't ask if they'd even want it. I just like digitally painted the cover they offered me, and not knowing how they would respond. And I sent it back to them, and it was Axel. Axel Alonso just started editing Spider-Man. And luckily enough, he loved it. And he was like, oh, this is amazing. And then it was like, boom. Now I was digitally painting covers. And at the time, it was new technology, and not a lot of people could do it even. So it really it allowed me to place myself in a category of one of the guys that could do it. And when I started doing the Hulk covers, I just felt this weird urge again, just to just do something different. Like just do. So so they offered me the Hulk first Hulk cover. And they're like, why don't you just homage the Steranko cover? And I was like, oh, that's great. So I did that. And then I felt like maybe I got into the homage groove, but I didn't want to homage comic book artists. I wanted to homage like Norman Rockwell. So I sent off these layouts, and I always do 3 layouts if I have time, 3 ideas, pick one. 2 of those ideas were kind of standard comic booky ideas, and one was just a straight up homage of Norman Rockwell's The Runaway, which is the cop and the little runaway kid at the diner. It's a very classic image. And I didn't think Axel would pick it, but I just felt this need to offer it. And he was like, oh yeah, let's do that. And I was like, boom, amazing. I did that. And as soon as I did that cover, all of a sudden I was basically allowed to do any kind of crazy cover I could think of. So I started just going crazy. I did an Apocalypse Now cover. I did a breakfast cereal cover. I started doing covers with just straight up photography. I just was like really experimenting and just throwing things around. And it was at a time when people weren't doing that. I think we've kind of grown into a culture that homages the past, for better or for worse. But at the time it was new. So it really let me, I only was on those Hulk covers for like a year, I think, something like that. But it really like allowed me to make a mark in the cover world, just by following these weird urges to like do something a little different. And yeah, and then I don't know, I've just kind of kept going. But now these days, now I'm actually airbrushing covers like with mechanical instruments, because now everyone digitally paints. Every artist has an iPad and they're all throwing digital paint around them. So now I feel this weird urge to like go back to like, you know, the airbrush, like Drew Struzan or Ken Stacy, or like
I
all
know
these like airbrush.
funny you should say that, because I've been working digitally mostly lately, but I'm really just like dying to pick up a pencil. And a big part of it too is, I've been doing interviews and talking to people a lot because I love artist editions.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I was like, because I don't know how possible one would be with some of your art, because you primarily worked digital,
Yeah.
so it's like, I think that as much as I love digital art, and as great as it is, and I do think there's definitely a place for it. Like, I hope that traditional art doesn't get completely lost, because, 20 years from now, we won't have any modern, artist editions or anything like that, because they just won't exist. But airbrushing, wow, that seems like messy and like complicated and like hard. But I guess you're a man up for a challenge, huh?
Well, I think it's the challenge I get addicted to. Like here's this is when I did this Mandalorian cover. I only hung it to keep it safe. Someone bought it. But it's fun to try new things. Here's what's weird. Like when I first started doing digital covers, I had to change my mind about art. I had to, because back then everyone was drawing on paper, painting on paper, and there was always an original. There was always like one copy that was the thing. And I loved following art auctions even back then. Like I've always been a fan of original art. Like the idea of like, there's this one painting or one image, and that has all the value, and everything is a copy of that. So when it comes a comic book, that's a copy. When it becomes a poster, it's a copy. There's always a copy of an original. And the idea as an artist that you're one person that creates one piece of art, and then other people can iterate it out, copy it out, distribute it out in different ways. That's always been art, whether it's sculpting or oil painting or drawing or whatever. But as soon as I started digitally painting, I had to let go of that idea of like there would be an original, and it was real hard. Like it was like it's almost the essence of art is that there's this original thing that embodies the artist's soul with whatever they're trying to do, and then everything else is a copy. And a copy is never as good as the original. But as soon as you do a digital, there no longer is an original. Like the same pixels can be shared to everyone at once at all time, as long as there's enough bandwidth. So there's no original. There is no one thing that's the expression of that artist's abilities or essence or goals or fears or hopes or whatever. So then what does art become then? What is art then? If there's no original, if there's no one thing, there's still one artist. Sometimes maybe it's a collaboration between three, or like we said earlier, but it really was a mind scramble. And I had to, at the time, just abandon myself to it. To the process, because back then I was like, well, my goal is not to make one original. My goal is to make a comic that can be shared to as many people as possible. That was my goal. My goal was, so I kind of removed myself from what it meant to be an artist in some respects to become a mass artist. But now I do feel the other way. And I've been doing painting on paper now for a few years again. And I feel that there is something important about drawing on paper sometimes, because there is something about the limitations of that medium of paper that can contain the artist essence in a way that digital cannot, because digital, what comes with digital is unlimited undos, unlimited layers, unlimited photo bashing, 3D models, tracing photos becomes so easy for people to do. Like, there's something about digital art, the infinite possibilities of it, and can harm it. And then right now, here's what's weird: is you look at the AI generated art, and the first time you see, right, the first time you see it, you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you see enough of it, and you're like, well, I've had enough of that. Because when I look at that stuff now, when I look at it,
it makes me physically ill, to be honest with you. Like,
yeah.
My brother's been posting about, he's an artist too, but he's been posting a bunch of them just to be funny. And I mean, they're not even funny to me. They just look hollow and awful and terrible. And just the thought of telling a computer to paint a painting and that's what it craps out. It's just, even, you're right. I mean, some of them do look cool or whatever, but I don't know, maybe I'm just an art snob or something. I just can't wrap my mind around it.
No, but I think you're right. Like, the revulsion, feeling revolted at the AI generated art is the correct response. And it's not the correct, like, oh, it's the good thing to do. I think it's the actual response, because, like, why are we drawn to art? Like why? If we break it down, why are we drawn to art? It's because it comes from a human soul for no other reason. There's no reason for art other than to communicate beauty, or maybe a narrative, or maybe like just there is an urge, a human soul-driven urge to make art. And then you have some computer programmers who are replicating that experience. So they're replicating a soul making art by taking all the different art that all the souls have made and programming a computer to kind of like bash them together into like this kind of weird, seamless montage. But it's the replication of a soul by capturing all the souls. It's almost satanic as a definition, because if you look at like the soul versus like the anti-soul, the Christ versus the antichrist, like it's like in a definition term, satanic would be an inversion of truth, right? Like, and I'm Canadian, I'm not very religious, but I mean in a technical sense, it's taking a soulless computer program and finding all these souls and trying to pretend that this thing is art, when all it's doing is like taking the skins of a million people and sewing them all together. It's like looking at a robot. It's like the Turing test. Like, I do think the first time you see the AI art, it's cool and fascinating and interesting. But then when you see enough of it, it's like there's just like death. It's just like,
yeah,
there's no humanity, you know?
I know, flipping through them, you do feel like you're sinking into deeper levels of hell. So satanic is definitely a good way to describe it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's a replication of the human need for love and connection and all that stuff, but it's just it doesn't have the soul in it. It's the essence. So there's an interesting quality about it because it taps into those pleasure centers just like the AI art is, but it's a false reality. So I don't believe the AI stuff will ever be anything important. I think it'll get good, it'll get better, but I don't think, like, the reason we're drawn to art is not because of like, oh, here's this specific aesthetic that I just am drawn to. It's like you can actually feel a connection to the soul that made it, you know?
I agree 100%. And I think that's why, like, I love the artist editions. I love looking at them. I love seeing the, like, the little stains. I love seeing, like, the notes and the
Yeah.
line and just all kinds of, goodness. Can you hear that?
No, not really.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. Anyway, it's just like I read an interview with Walt Simonson not too long ago, and he said something super profound because we were talking about anchors and everything like that. And he said the penciler is the only one that you don't see on the page at the end of the day. And that's so true because someone's inking over their lines and erasing like the base of what they did. So he said, it was like always like an important or a struggle or just important for him to make as much of an impact and statement as he could in his pencils as possible. And I realize you do avoid that by inking your own stuff. And I definitely see the desire for that. Like you said, there are a lot of inker teams that are pretty amazing. You have worked with an inker, but not
Yeah,
very often.
yeah, a few inkers. It's just been a long time since I have an urge to do it again, to be honest, because I miss, like, when you're a one-man show, it's like it's a bit lonely. Like, I kind of miss a little bit. Like I want to be disappointed or excited by what comes back sometimes. I haven't had that experience in a long time, and I would like to do it again, to be honest. I kind of miss it.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. It's fun. I've collaborated a couple times recently, either inking someone or coloring someone else, and it's gratifying in a different way because it's surprising. It's something you would have never done on your own, and it's another valuable like learning experience. You can learn stuff about your art, the way that people see your art that you don't necessarily see it. So I
Yeah.
definitely, it's like as much as, and because the gist of my channel is like nostalgia, looking over old comics and critiquing and commenting on the art. And one of the joys and the laments is the inker penciler collaboration because there's so many good ones, but there are so many botched pencil jobs,
Right.
from bad inkers. From the
Yeah. Well, you've got the McFarlane artifact. Is it artist or artifact? I can't remember. Which way.
Artist edition.
Yeah, so I have the same. I have the same one in my office right now. I have like 3 of them. I have the Dark Knight one. I have the McFarlane one, and I have an EC cover one. Those are the 3 I have. But I love McFarlane. McFarlane's a great example because when McFarlane burst onto the scene, he was, of course, being inked by other people. And I remember, I don't know if you remember seeing this. I remember seeing in the back of a Marvel comic book, maybe Marvel Age or something like that, there was some inker took it upon themselves to re-ink some McFarlane stuff. Maybe someone trying to break in. I can't remember. Because they used to feature artists trying to break in back then. Isn't that strange? They don't do that anymore. Yeah, but they would, and Marvel would, for a time, was featuring artists trying to break in, trying to kind of showcase up and coming people that you might see someday soon, or maybe Ramita's Raiders or whatever it was. And there was an inker who had re-inked some McFarlane Hulk stuff and simplified all his lines and presented it as like the way an inker should fix his art. And it was, I remember thinking at the time, like, this is so strange. Like,
that sounds god awful.
Yeah, but what was weirder about it was in the back of a Marvel comic, like as an example of someone trying to break in. I think someone trying to break in. I should find it. I don't know where. I can't even remember where it would be. But here's the weird thing about art: like those flaws are what become the strengths. So like McFarlane does have a lot of flaws. Like his art is not anatomically correct. Is not technically amazing, but his design sense is so amazing. And he's so interested in the cool that he just uses and just the insane level of detail and rendering for the time outworked everyone. He used those things that he was good at to outshine the things that held him back, and it became his strength. Like actually, if you're less worried about technically drawing a human correctly, well, you can open your artwork up to amazing, interesting, and inventive design. You know, like if you're George Perez, who's a very technical, amazing artist, but because he draws so technically perfect, him trying to do a McFarlane design sense into his paneling wouldn't work because all his people would look too, like John Byrne. The mannequins are too good. The mannequins are too perfect to allow the McFarlane, like when you watch Todd draw on those like VHS how to draw videos I used to devour, he'd just throw a foot here and he'd throw a hand there and then a head here and then he'd fill in the gaps. And you can see that in his art. And that's what makes his art so dynamic and so amazing. Like Spider-Man's back is broken 3 ways, but because it's broken 3 ways, he gets this amazing level of just power. You know, you say Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby is not a technical artist. Like when you look at some of his figures, there's a lot of flaws, but he's got that power. Like he's got so much power in those big shapes. It's just like everything's power. But if he was more technical, he wouldn't be able to draw the power because it wouldn't be technically accurate. So art is very interesting. You know, all your flaws can be your strengths in whatever you do.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you say that because I think that comic book art is so subjective and different in the fact that, it's like you said, I don't know how much of this still exists, but, you came into the comics realizing that you needed to improve a lot, you know what I mean? But you look at someone like even John Byrne or George Perez, and their first issues are so clunky and amateurish and, everything like that. But the potential is there, the rawness is there. And luckily the editors at the time saw that. And a lot of artists who turned out to be some of, the greatest comic book artists ever, fortunately, they saw the potential and they were given the opportunity to hone their craft while they were working. And I think, you just don't have that anymore. I mean, someone coming on, what a better boot camp than suddenly having to draw, 20 pages a day in a month. You know what I mean? How can you not get better that way? So
yeah,
I feel crazy. Like you have to be more polished. You have to have a lot of followers on Instagram and stuff like that to break into the industry now. And I just wish we would see more of like that, like the darn good artists with a lot of potential exploding and just like growing and month by month in front of your eyes. You talk about the Todd McFarlane, like buying those, as they came out was just like amazing. Like you said, I mean, looking at this artist edition, it shows even more, as you said, some of his weaknesses as far as anatomy and things like that. But I was a fan of his work, even when he was at DC on Infinity Inc. He was, it didn't look as good as it did. Even I feel like Hulk is when he really started to like find his groove. But but the imaginative page layouts and just like, the big capes and stuff, like we're already starting. So I think that the potential was always there for greatness, and just his enthusiasm and his love for art and the fact that he just loves to draw. Like there's nobody going to stop Todd McFarlane from making comic books. And thank God they did.
Yeah, but then here's what's interesting about Todd again. Well, I don't know if I said this, but Todd McFarlane, one of my favorite comic artists of all time. Like I love his stuff. I've always loved his stuff. I think for me, he's very influential. Like him, Steranko, Frank Miller, like those are, guys like those are really some of the people that I really kind of like inform what I do in many ways. But what stopped Todd McFarlane was success stopped Todd McFarlane. Like he hasn't drawn a comic book in 10 years. I don't know how long it's been since Todd's drawn a comic book. I mean, he's inks. And he started inking Greg Capullo. And here's a weird thing. Greg Capullo, in many ways, is a more technically proficient artist than Todd. Like his structures are more solid, and there's less like weird poses. And Todd inks Greg, so he was inking Greg, so he was giving this the Todd aesthetic to this more structured base, and it was good. And you could even make the argument that it was technically better than when Todd was doing his own but it wasn't better. It was like almost as good as Todd doing his own stuff, but there is a gap there. And Capullo's an amazing artist. Like in his own right, he's amazing. I'm more talking about the Spawn stuff. When Capullo was drawing Spawn and McFarlane was still inking him, it was a step away from the flaws of McFarlane, but the flaws are what made that art sparkle. And I think Capullo, he's again an amazing artist, and his Batman stuff, especially lately, has been just amazing. But I prefer. Here's another example, like the Bone stuff with Jeff Smith. He was writing his own stuff, drawing his own book, an amazing tale, just like, oh my God, so cool. I shared it with my son, amazing. And then he started working with a writer and drawing someone else's story of Bone, and Ellison became less interesting. And the writing was probably more technically proficient and technically better. But again, I think that essence, that soul of the artist wasn't as visible on that newer Bone stuff that Jeff Smith was only drawing. And the McFarlane soul or essence wasn't as visible when he was only inking someone else's pencils. And I just think that the flaws of the art are what make the art. It's not even something that you can overcome. I think it's actually embedded in the quality of the art. Just like a human being, like we're all flawed, damaged people. Like we all have heartache and struggles and ceilings we can't get past, and we don't love people enough. We're not as kind as we could be. We're not as successful as we could be. We don't work as hard as we could. But it's like it's that flaw that makes you human, and that flaw is embedded in art. Like it's the flaw. John Byrne has flaws. His flaws are embedded in his art in a way that makes the art amazing. And if you took away those flaws, I think you take away some of the art. So I wish McFarlane, Todd, I don't know you. I think I said hi to you once a long time ago when I was trying to break in. If you ever watch this, please draw the inside of a comic book again, because I would love it. I would love to see, warts and all, the McFarlane 20-page experience. And I hope it's Spawn versus Spider-Man. That would be my ultimate 20-page experience. It's got to happen. I know there's some weird blood between Marvel and McFarlane. There used to be. I don't know if there is, but historically. Wouldn't that be amazing?
It's funny you should say that, because I was thinking about that, looking at the Spider-Man artist edition over here, because we did get Batman Spawn by McFarlane, and it's a crime that we don't have Spawn Spider-Man, because, I mean, as much, you talk about as beautiful as the Capullo McFarlane art was. Yes, it was a huge letdown for me. And as good as Spawn was, I'm sorry, but I feel like Todd McFarlane will always be Spider-Man for me. Like, that's my first love.
Right, yeah.
I definitely am more drawn to his Spider-Man than his Spawn. Not that I don't like Spawn, but, I just feel the same way you do. And I just think, but I was thinking, because, Alex Ross just came out with that Abrams, Fantastic Four full circle book. So I thought, why not get like a Todd McFarlane Abrams Spider-Man book? And yeah, Spider-Man with Spawn could be like the subject. I mean, with Mark Silvestri's Batman series comes out next week. I mean, perhaps that's like a good omen for, like, I don't know, like, dare we hope to see Jim Lee on the X-Men? I mean, who knows? Right. If I'm joking, why not? Did we ever think we'd get like a 7-part Mark Silvestri Batman Joker story? I mean, how cool is that? Like, I'm so looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, here's what I find interesting is like I don't quite know, and this is probably because I jump back and forth a lot. Like I just came back from 3 months doing directing stuff out of town. And now I'm finishing up a book called E-ratic for AWA.
I love E-ratic.
Oh, thanks. But there's been so much turbulence and change in the world right now. Everything is getting redefined. Like comics are getting redefined, and directing is getting redefined. Like movies are redefined, TV shows are redefined. The TV show I just directed, I did 5 episodes. It's being financed in a way more similar to an independent movie than a traditional series, which is a new way people are trying to do things. And what comes with that is some weird stuff that comes with independent movie making, which I've also done. I've done independent movies where independently financed, and I've also done studio films where the money's just there. But independent financing, you're always struggling to close your financing, and there's always like emergencies, and it's like a very financially harrowing experience for the producers. And then comic books are changing so rapidly. Like there is so we went through the image. We went through my heyday of collecting was the McFarlane Spider-Man. That was the heyday of I think I was in grade 8. I was like, that was like after school, we'd go to the comic book store on the way to bus home. Like that was like, oh my gosh, that's all my feels are in that era. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of got out of it for a couple of years in high school because I was more interested in girls and being a teenager, didn't have the money, broke teenager. And then by grade 12, I kind of jumped back in and was like, oh my gosh, I miss it so much. And this is so amazing. But it's changed so much. Like there was a time when comic books had so much power in the stories and the art. And, you probably had these conversations. I would have these conversations with other comic people like, oh my gosh, if only normal people knew all these amazing characters and stories and adventures, and like these would make amazing movies. No one's made a really amazing movie like this. All this stuff, these would make amazing video game. Like, oh my gosh, so much power was in those comic books, untapped potential. And then it got tapped, and then the movies did happen to everyone's shock. And then the normal world cut up to the inherent power of that medium and those characters and those stories and the legacy and the art and the writing. And now it feels, in some ways, the industry to me feels like the victim of a vampire that's gotten like the essence has been sucked out by another medium, a more powerful medium in terms of pop culture, film, TV. And I feel like the comic book essence needs to be shored up and electrified back to life. In some ways, I feel like all that energy that I just used to just blow me away in shock at looking at neo-Nazis and Dark Knight Returns. What? Oh my gosh. I remember sharing that with my grade 6 teacher. And he devoured it. And I was like, I shouldn't be sharing this book. It's got Nazi topless bad guys fighting Batman as an old man. It's so dark and so crazy and so taboo. But I don't like, where did that all go? Like, where is that electric shock, taboo, renegade spirit? Like, I think it got pushed into mass entertainment like we always hoped it would. And then they sucked the life essence out of it. And I don't know, I can't think right now of a book, maybe you can, that is shocking in a good way. That just, how are they doing this? Like, I can't think of that book anymore. And here's what I think happened. You tell me what you think. We went through the image boom where the artists just took over. Like, hey, you like this art? Follow me over here. We'll get all art. It's all art. And it was a shockwave through the industry. And then in a backlash over many years, over a decade, it became the writers who took over. But the writers started, like, it's when you're a comic book artist and you draw an amazing art, you can't, like a thing like Hollywood doesn't option the art, doesn't option the aesthetic. It can't replicate the aesthetic. It doesn't have the ability to take Travis Chare's art and make a movie with Travis Chare's art. It just doesn't have that ability. So Travis Charest cannot be monetized by the Hollywood financial system. But a story can be taken, put into another screenplay, cast some actors, get a director, and then monetized to billions of dollars in the Hollywood system. So because of that, I think the writing of comics became artificially more valued, and also a backlash to the Image days where the art became overvalued and the quality suffered. But because you can't monetize the art like you can the story right now because of technology or whatever, right now the writing is more important. The writers are more important than the artists in terms of financial value. And because the writing is more important, those writers want to turn over that value into profit, become successful, become, have success, economic success, cultural success, become recognized, become a Stan Lee. And so what happens? Well, now they have to start being careful. Because if you say the wrong thing and you're a writer, you could get your head chopped off culturally. You could get thrown off the boat. You have so much value, inherent value in your pockets, in your hands. But if you say the wrong thing, if you do the wrong thing, if the story's the wrong way, you will get attacked by the wolves of culture right now. It's never been more dangerous to be a writer, and you've never been more valued. And so what does danger plus value make? It makes shit. I just think we need this renegade voices that just don't care, or just want to poke the bear, or just want to, stab their own eye out to make art. And I think in writing especially, and I blame writing right now in comics, it's full of cowards. Not the writers are cowards, but the system creates a cowardly response. Because you can get so rich right now. You could, hypothetically, not everyone, a lot of poor writers, but you could get so rich. But if you just go the wrong way, you get thrown off the boat. And it's not like that with artists. And so you'll see the artists are just as daring right now as ever. But the writers, I don't know, they're writing these traps. They're writing these traps to make crappy comics. And it's not their fault. It's just the way the system is currently set up. And I don't know how to fix it. Like, I don't know how to change that,
Yeah, I think that, it's like you should never undermine the value of art and comics. And I think that's a huge mistake. I talked with former editor-in-chief of IDW, Chris Ryall, and recently. And, we were talking about, because this conversation has been going on in some of my circles and stuff. And, people are trying to say like the writing is more important than the art. And he said that any conversation that says the writing is more important than the art in a visual medium isn't a serious conversation. And I totally agree with that. Like, comics is nothing with art, and it never will be. And I think that Hollywood is a problem in a way because it popularized comic book properties, but it did nothing to popularize comic books. Comic books, still on their best day, like, you're a bestseller if you sell 100,000 copies, whereas Superman, used to sell 1 million copies. So
Yeah.
why, it's just sad. And I guess maybe it's a sign of the times or whatever. It's like, I guess it's hard to get someone who is watching Thanos on the big screen to get excited about arguably a less exciting comic book, but they don't know the secret. You know what I mean? And it's like, I thought of that saying like, I wouldn't want to be the member of any club or I wouldn't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member. I feel like it's like the secret is out or something. It's like, comic books and superheroes are accessible to everybody, but they don't know, what we know. You know what I mean? They don't know like the joy of like reading a monthly comic book and just being excited in that way. You know what I mean? It's like, you love Superman. Guess what? You can pick up a comic book every single week and read his continuing adventures. But that said, I mean, I do feel that there is a slight problem, like with Marvel and DC. I do feel there is a certain responsibility with them to sort of guide the comic book industry in a way, since they are the big two. And if you do like independent comic books, I'm sure that your first comic book had to have been a DC or a Marvel, possibly, or whatever. But I feel like they have all these weird agendas now. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like they're forced agendas in a way that comic books have always done the things that they want to do. Like if you read Chris Claremont's X-Men run, it's culturally diverse. It's about the struggle against mutants. It's about persecution. It's about otherness. It's about so many things, you know what I mean? Without, beating you over the head with it. And now I feel like it's being beaten over the head with it. It's like, we're going to put a woman writer on this book just because she's a woman. But there are, you know what I mean? It's like, but there are women in comic books. There have always been women in comic books, Anne Nesenti, Louise Jones, just like Virginia Romita, what's her name? Marie Severin. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm all for it, and I think it is totally necessary, and I'm glad for the cultural shift. But what about just telling good stories with good art? That should be the number one focus of comic books.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think my supposition is that, here's my supposition. My supposition is that it's less that there's an imposed ideology on comics at the moment, and it's more that the Hollywood system has corrupted comic books to make it appear like there's an imposed ideology, because you have not just opportunities for writers to really break out and make a lot of money with their own creator-owned ideas, but you have also editorial teams. There's now a path to the difference in pay between a comic book editor and a producer is, that's a chasm. There is real money in the Hollywood machine. Like people get rich in that world. And it's so tantalizing to even just dream of entering that world. And there's so much overlap that it's entirely possible. You can be an editor at DC and scooped up and become, you could be running, look at James Gunn just is now running DC film. Like when I met James, he was just directing Slither. He had done a Troma movie and written Scooby-Doo. There is potential for all of these people to, even an artist, like Jim Lee, he ended up running DC Comics, and Jeff Johns ended up, running DC film for a while. Like, it's like this corruption of money and power is, and when it touches a subversive industry like comics has always been subversive. And that's why I love it. Like the renegade, like Todd McFarlane is a subversive artist, a subversive creator. Like he does things the wrong way. And there's always guys that do things wrong. Jim Steranko did things the wrong way. Like Stan Lee did things the wrong way. You like there's that power in doing things the wrong way that is just so amazing. And there's too much overlap right now with this system that does things for a lot of money. And if you step out of line, you don't get invited to the party. Like and it's weird because I've worked in both industries. So I kind of understand. I think I understand a little more than maybe some people, that with that opportunity becomes the consequences. And like comic books have, I don't think it's that we need to rally against the imposed ideology in comic books. I think we need to rally to create cool stuff that are separate from the Hollywood industry. Because okay, here's an example. So for instance, in comics right now, how would you define the greatest success of a comic book artist or writer artist or whatever? You probably would say, or you go ahead, give me an answer. What would be the greatest right now in modern, like a modern creator, not a legacy creator, not even a Mike Farley, but a newer person in the field?
I mean, it's funny because since just given the nature of it all, I think being able to be paid to do your work is the sign of being successful. You know what I mean? But
yeah, no, totally, and that's a valid. But I mean, culturally, what's a cultural like version? Not your definition, but what would the cultural definition of success for a comic creator be?
How many followers you have on Instagram or
I would say,
that?
I'd say it's like, oh my God, they're turning your comic book into a TV show. Yeah. Or, oh my God, they're turning your comic book into a movie. So here's what I found so funny. And I think this is true. So you can say, oh yes, I have this many followers on Instagram, but that's only a certain level. Why do you want those follows? Oh, to get your comic book made into a movie, to get it made into a TV show. You want to starring Tom Cruise or Will Smith. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. But what you're really saying there, or what I'm suggesting, is that if that is the definition for the ultimate success in your medium of choice as an artist, is for another medium to take what you did and then remake it with other people, someone else writing the screenplay, someone else directing it, someone else acting it, someone else production designing, someone else doing all the costume design, other people taking your thing and making it somewhere else. Maybe they give you a producer credit. Maybe you can chime in on some script notes, but really you're out of the process. I don't care how involved you are. You're out of that process and other people are making it. And for this is the Achilles heel of comics in today's world with the way the system is created, is if your ultimate version of success is other people taking what you did and doing it themselves. Like, how do you win that game? Like,
yeah, it's true.
Like, look at Mike Mignola's Hellboy. If you Google Hellboy right now in Google, you probably have Del Toro's trilogy show up, or maybe even the newer movie show up. And how long would it take to get Mignola's comic books showing up? Like, there's just so much power in film and TV, and it's a vampiric power in relation to comic books. I don't know how do you fight that? Like, I don't know.
It's funny because one of the weird things, like thinking about things that you're saying, like why like DC and Marvel, like they see how much money they can make off of their properties in film, right? But then they don't want to put any money in the comic books. Like I've heard that page rates are the same as they were in the 70s and things like that. So I don't understand why they don't value that for the commodity that it is. It's like, this is a valuable, why not nurture that? Like put money into, because I feel like right now it's like we're going to run out of like Marvel stories for them to produce because of the fact that I feel like Marvel had its heyday. And then like Chris Claremont's a perfect example. I feel like everyone who follows him on the X-Men is just killing and bringing back Jean Grey and sort of rehashing a lot of storylines. I mean, not to say that everything isn't there, but why wouldn't Marvel Studios say like Marvel Comics is a good investment? That's what makes our money from the source material. So why not pay like Art Adams to do a new X-Men book with Chris Claremont, and then we have like another great source of material to cull from. I don't know, it's like I just feel like comics has been so good to Hollywood in a way. Why doesn't Hollywood return the favor and invest in such a valuable resource for it?
Yeah, well, listen, I totally get that.
I mean, I guess the argument is because people don't buy enough comic books to pay for it, but
I think the truest argument is that Marvel is whoever is running Marvel in that day of that year of that decade. So, Marvel in the 60s, sorry, is different than Marvel in the 70s, different than Marvel in the 80s, different than Marvel in the 90s. It's different when Ike Perlman owned it. It's different when, it's now that Disney bought it, it's different. Like, it's Marvel is just a corporation, and these corporations are, it's whoever is running them at the time. DC Comics is whoever is running at the time. So you cannot expect any loyalty from a corporation because there is it's not a real person. Legally, we treat them as people. Right. This is, legally, we consider them people for tax purposes, etc. But there's no soul, there's no person, there's no emotion behind a corporation. They will fire anyone any day if it'll make them $1. And if you have people running the corporation that value comic books, then maybe they would, try to throw some more money at comic books. But I think it's if you have a bad parent and you're being raised by a bad parent, you can't make that parent see the error of their ways and apologize and then support you in your life. Like, it's up to you to make your own life and up to you to take those lessons with you and maybe treat people better. So when you deal with a corporation, corporations sometimes they're great to people, sometimes they're not. Like, it's just not a person. It's a ghost. It's like not a ghost. It's like a skin suit. It's like not a real person. It's like a robot underneath there. It's like Bishop and Aliens or whatever. It's like, it's not real. So you can't, if you are trying to get some kind of something out of that corporation, all you can do is leverage power. Sometimes that power is your popularity, maybe it's your voice in social media to shame them or whatever. That's like all you can really do with the corporation is leverage power. And I think this is why people drift away to do creator-owned stuff. And this is why Todd did Spawn and all this stuff. And maybe it would have been cooler if he stayed on Spider-Man, but corporation owned that character. He didn't own that character. And by doing Spawn, he owns the character. He owns everything. I don't know. It's a very difficult situation. But here's the other weird thing. Chris Claremont was the definitive X-Men writer, but without the X-Men, would we know Chris Claremont? Like, without Spider-Man, would we know Todd McFarlane? Like, there's something that do you need an X-Men to create a Jim Lee? Jim Lee owned the X-Men for a decade, probably still now. But without the X-Men there, would Jim Lee be Jim Lee? Like, they kind of need each other. It's like it's a give and take. I don't know.
I agree, like 100%, because it's like I said, like I want Spider-Man. I don't want Spawn. I want X-Men. I don't want Wildcats. You know what I mean? I know that sounds awful, but I like, you talk about success, and I have to say, like, I feel like if you measure success by just being happy and doing what you want to do, and you're a prime example of a way to have a successful career. I watched this interview you did with my buddy Ryan for Comics Lounge, and you talked about, having a love of comics, animation, and film, and you decided to try comics first because you thought that would be the hardest. But, yeah. You ventured into film, you directed, movies such as, Cabin Fever, Patient Zero, and other movies. And, you did some great, amazing, iconic covers for Marvel, indeed, or no. Oh yeah, actually, I do remember a recent Batman cover that you did that was very cool. But, it's like, so you've had success at Marvel, and I feel like that's kind of what every comic book artist probably dreams of, especially someone like you or me who, grew up on Marvel Comics. And, at the end of the day, I want my own successful published, creator-owned comic book. But then I still want to draw Alpha Flight too, you know what I mean? Right. And I feel like you have the advantage, it's like you do your own creator-owned project like Renato Jones or E-ratic, but then you come back and do Amazing Fantasy or like that dope Deadpool variant cover that looks very heavily influenced by Todd McFarlane. So that was super cool. Is it a holofoil?
No, I've done a few of these covers. I've done like 4 or 5 of them. They're like fake foil covers where I've just taken
okay.
a foil texture and embedded it into the background and through the colors, because it's like my way of homaging that era. Like my prime era of collecting was that, 90s Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld era of comics.
And then you did that really cool Yoda cover coming up. And the orange snake, I feel like, didn't the little Yoda action figure come with an orange snake or something? Like
Totally. Yeah, I've never seen anyone draw the orange snake, so I wanted to draw the orange snake on this Yoda cover, Yoda #1 variant. But listen, I struggle with like, what is success every day? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I wanted to break into Marvel Comics so desperately, and then it happened. And I wanted to direct movies, and it happened. And I wanted to direct TV, and it happened. But it all feels empty. Like, like success is never. I don't think you can ever feel like I did it, I'm successful. Like, it feels like you just stepped up a step on a staircase, and that staircase goes so high, and there's no end, and you keep waiting for this idea that you'll be successful, and it just never is there. Like, it's just, especially when you're an artist and you're plagued with.
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, it's funny because success seems like an end point, but actually it's kind of just a beginning, because once you become successful, you have to, like, it's like, what's next? What's your next thing? How are you going to maintain that success? So
it's like a taunting horrible ghost that is like taunting you towards something, and you can never quite grasp it. And every time you step towards it, it's just like you're gonna not just, you don't know if you're stepping up or stepping off the staircase. And the higher you go up that staircase, the bigger the fall. And it's just like this is why you see when artists or writers get to a certain level, like, they get safe, because it's just that fall gets so scary.
mm-hmm.
Like, like, it's no big deal when you're just breaking in to just do a thing with all your heart and might and change the world and try new things. And then you get a taste of, it worked. And then what? To try to do the same thing again with all your effort and all your might. And then what's the definition of creative failure? It's a hack. Oh, that person's hacking it out. They're redoing the same thing they did before. But if you're just so concerned with succeeding, maybe you're trying to redo the same thing you did before because you just want more of it. You want to get to there. But it's like, creatively, it's death. It's death to try to replicate your success. So, like, it's such a creative life is so hard, because there's just no definition of what you should be doing it, and it changes all the time. At one time, comic books were like legitimately the way to become a millionaire pop culture idol for a short time before I broke in. I was still a teenager, but like, you could become a multi-millionaire, buy a $33 million baseball just by drawing comics. And then when I broke into Marvel Comics, Marvel was under bankruptcy protection, and they were sending out emails to, like, the lights had to be off at the office at 7, and FedEx had to be not next day FedEx, but like 3-day FedEx, because they were trying to survive going bankrupt. Like that, like then where do you? It's just, I don't know. And then you probably know this, but when you create, you're plagued with so much insecurity and so much like, what are people going to think? Is anyone even going to see it? Like, even if it's good, is anyone going to see it? And if everyone sees it, is this the good thing that I did, or is this one of those times where I stumble, and now the thing that everyone sees is me stumbling? Like, it's just so fraught with failure. Like, art life is just so fraught with just death.
And we should just end right there. I'm just kidding.
But I'll say this though, that razor edge of life or death is what makes art work. So you can't remove those stakes and still make good art. Like, it's just impossible. So
it's like the agony and the ecstasy. It's like, yeah, I mean, you talk about the struggling artist and the pain and stuff. I mean, but that shows you have the true soul of an artist. You know what I mean? How you know, it's like in my eyes, you're like super successful and you're like struggling with your own success. You know what I mean? So it is all relative and subjective. But it's funny and it's great and it shows the love and power of comics that, you know, you would think that once you become a director, it's like, okay, cool, I've made it. You know what I mean? I don't need comic books anymore, but they keep calling you back. Thank God, because I love
Yeah.
your
Well, this is
art.
the trick. This is the same trap. I get people telling me this all the time. Like, you're still doing comic books? Like where you're directing? Like why? Like again, it's that trap of like, oh, your comic book is only successful if someone else makes it in another medium. It's like, oh, you're like somehow directing is a step up from comic books. And I will tell you that there's nothing further from the case. Like directing is a different job with different requirements and different skills entirely. And I can't think of a life where I'm not creating comic books. Like it's a different medium and there's different challenges and different things to do. And like, they're just different jobs. So I I've been at conventions and I've had people from show up and be like, well, what are you doing? Aren't you? I thought you were directing now. Like as if like, oh, things have gone off course in my life or whatever.
I think
like,
that's sad. Yeah, like, oh, I guess the directing thing didn't work out. So you had to come crawling
right,
back
right,
to
right,
comics rather than being like, well, see, my take is totally different. I'm like, wow, you love comic books so much that you're just, you know, you just want to be part of it still, you know what I mean? And you still have something to say as a cartoonist and as a comic book creator. So, you know, it's like a few people I mentioned that I was talking to, like, we're super excited. Like, people really like voraciously love your art. It's, you know, so screw you, Hollywood. You know, do not take Kaare away from us completely. So
I think the way comic books survive is the way I do it in my life is just hard wall. Like there's a hard wall.
yeah.
Like I created a film career separate from comic books, and I think if we can wall off comic books from Hollywood, that's when the comic books will boom again. I truly believe that it's just a separate industry and it's the overlap which has muddied the waters. And if we can wall off those two mediums, less overlap will create more success, I think, in comic books.
Well, you know, you bring up a good point, and I think that that is important. Like comics should not be beholden to Hollywood in any way, shape, or form. And you're right, and succeed on its own as its own entity for sure. But you seem like you're in a unique position. You know, you talk about success being someone else making your comic book. What about, you know, you have Renato Jones and you have E-ratic. So what's stopping you from, you know, directing movies based on your own properties?
Yeah, no, it's possible, totally possible. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's not something I'm chasing. Like when I made it Renato Jones, I made it like I made a specific decision to make something that wouldn't translate to film. Like it would be hard, but it's not saying we're not working on it. There's some people we're talking, whatever. There's always things going around, but like like that Renato Jones is about someone who hunts the evil that hides behind super wealth. And what is Hollywood? Who controls Hollywood? It's the kind of evil that hides behind super wealth. So it's that would be a difficult proposition, but maybe it'll happen. Like I think why not? It could happen. But it was never the goal of Renato Jones. You know, that would be if the comic books. Here's a weird thing: is like I write screenplays and I write comic books, and I have attempted to create something that could be both at the same time. But there's just such a different. Like the stories that make comic books click and work do not, I don't think, they're not the same stories that make Hollywood work. I think Mark Millar does it the best. He can create a thing that can translate both ways pretty well.
Yeah.
But even then, it's not, there's always a lot of change that is required. Like it's a trick. It's a trick to think you can make one that fulfills both functions. They are I think they're separate mediums that require separate intention.
I think Sin City is like kind of a good example of like a
Yeah.
marriage of film and comics. I think that was probably one of the most successful adaptations,
Yeah.
probably.
And
And
remember when Frank made it? Why did he make it? I remember he came off of RoboCop 2 and was so um
Disillusioned to Hollywood.
disillusioned, disenchanted with Hollywood. He swore he would never work in Hollywood again, made Sin City as almost an FU to Hollywood and superhero comics and like everyone, and just was like a big FU, made Sin City. And then what happens? Oh, it became super successful. And how do we know it's successful? Because it was adapted into another medium by other people that he was not involved. And he was like, they even called him co-director and let him sit beside the director, the actual director, because at the time Frank Miller had never directed anything in his life, and part of the deal to make that movie was he would be able to co-direct it. But I mean, if Rodriguez had left that process, Frank Miller wouldn't know how to run the machine. And if Frank Miller had left the process, Rodriguez would still probably be the same movie. And again, Frank Miller is one of my favorite creators of all time. No disrespect to him at all. Just he had never done it before. Different job. But even if your material does translate, you have to attack it with that fuck you to everyone, to give comic books the power that they need. Because if he had gone out and said, I'm going to try to create a crime comic that could be adapted into a movie, it would not be the Sin City that we love. Like, he attacked it with the biggest fuck you he could come up with. And that's what happened. And I think that's the power of comics. It needs to be subversive. It needs to be an attack against establishment. It needs to be an attack against attrition, against the machine, against everyone. And it's that rebellious spark that I love in comic books so much.
Yeah, I mean, like I think of someone like Bill Sienkiewicz, one of my other favorite artist editions and artists, and actually someone who is definitely cut from the same cloth as you are, as far as using multiple media and just like always trying to keep it fresh and do something new. You know, people like were pretty like mixed when he first hit the scene. Like, people hated his New Mutants. A lot of people thought he like ruined comics and everything like that. And now he's, you know, so beloved and such an icon. And I feel like a lot of people try to recreate some of what he does, which I think is next to impossible. There is nothing worse than seeing someone trying to ape Bill Sienkiewicz's style. Like, you talk about the soul. It's all about the soul when it comes to art, you know what I mean? And it's like, if the soul isn't there, it can be the shittiest drawing, like you said with Kirby. And that's the beauty of comics art. It's like, I think I read in an interview with Ed McGuinness, who is one of my favorite comic book artists. And he said, you know, his anatomy is not perfect. It is not technically correct. He said, but it's his anatomy, and it's consistent, and it's believable, and it works within the parameters of his art. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And also Kirby was drawing, I mean, he was drawing like 4 pages a day or whatever he was doing back then, right? Like, back then it wasn't like now. Marvel expects for a penciler to do an issue in 5 weeks. That's kind of what they expect you to be able to do. But back in Kirby's day, I mean, he was drawing like a madman. Like, the rates were so low, he kind of had to. But yeah, it's totally insane. Here's the other thing about people who were hated. When McFarlane showed up, there was a certain demographic of comic books that thought he was terrible, that thought he was awful, that thought he was. I remember when the Image guys showed up, Rob and Todd and Jim, and there was a certain demographic that just hated them. And it was like, I think that's a life lesson, especially in the creative field. Like, if you show up and you show up on the job and you're kind of new, if you're breaking in, and the reaction is not one of love but of hatred, that's not all bad. Like, that could be indicative of a greater love to follow. Like, art is weird. It changes all the time, and you never quite know. You could be dead, and your art could be discovered, which has happened with some painters or writers. Like, it's a weird game.
I know, like you said, like, yeah, like, you know, we still look at art and, you know, from artists who are long dead and just love their art and marvel at it. And Yeah, I can't imagine looking at an AI painting 100 years from now and having feeling anything but disgust.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's the other trick: is like that AI was programmed by people, so it's like we have this imaginary idea of AI that it's almost sentient, and oh, we can do all these things that because it's almost a living breathing entity itself, but it's just programmed by people. So it'd be like, if you had 100 people hiding in a little box and they are all cutting up magazines and pasting them together and putting them out, like that's what AI is. It's just the intentions of people put into code that can operate very quickly. So like you can't you cannot if you remove the soul from a person, that person is dead. And I just think it's like the AI. I just don't think we have to worry about the AI thing. It's just like it's interesting, but it's only really interesting if I've only seen it really interesting when I've seen an actual artist take an AI output and then work it more. You know, like just like if you take a magazine and cut up the pictures and make a collage and paint it on top of that, that's interesting. If you take AI outputs and you then go in and mess around with them, that's interesting. But just straight up AI outputs, uh, not interesting at all. I think algorithms are another trick in the trap.
Mhm. So one of the things you mentioned was E-ratic, is your series from AWA. That's currently like, what is #2 out now, or
Yeah, number 2 of season 2 just popped on the
okay.
shelves, and I'm just I just finished #3. I'm just attacking #4 at the moment.
One of the standout things for me from the first series, I haven't gotten the second one yet, sorry, but is the amazing coloring. Like I felt like, because it wasn't you, it was somebody else, and I thought that that was such uh like in your wheelhouse as far as like doing something different and bold. Like the colors are so bold and cool, and I just love them. So what kind of process did you have working with that colorist, or direction did you give them, or did you
Yeah,
just find this colorist that you loved and said go to town, or
this is Brian Reber. So I've known Brian for a long time, and we never really worked together. I just knew him personally. And then at AWA, I was like, I originally was going to color it myself, but again, I'm feeling the need, like I want to collaborate a little bit more. And I felt like coloring slows me down so much. I wanted the art. I wanted to bring the art up a little bit by handing off some of the responsibilities of coloring. So Axel suggested Brian, and I was like, oh yeah, Brian's great. So we do this weird thing. Brian and I kind of collaborate in a weird way where I'm creating these backgrounds, and then I kind of came up with a color scheme. And then Brian colors the pages, and then he sends them back, and I just do a little tweak at the end just to integrate it back into my art. So
mm-hmm.
it's been pretty good. Like I enjoy it quite a bit, because what's cool is I'll send Brian my line art. He'll send me back colors, and then seeing the line art colored, it'll be like a palette cleanse, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, the line art needs fixing. And I'll often like re-ink things because the color will show me how bad the drawing is, and then it'll allow me to give one last finish, one last buff. And I'll fix some colors or something like that. But the idea of E-ratic was to create like a poppy, colorful, energetic, like animal based, but in the techno age superhero. Like I wanted to make a character with a costume again. I wanted to like have a costume with a tail. I wanted to have an animal based name. I wanted to have ears. I wanted to do all these weird things, which I just felt there was a hole. Like I haven't seen a real superhero comic in a long time, like of a new character, like with a like, because in today's Instagram age, like it's like I like superheroes that hide their identities. I don't relate to superheroes that just show their face all the time. Because for me, heroics is like something you don't trade on for status. It's something you do because you have an urge to help people, not because you're trying to elevate your status in that social hierarchy. But Instagram and YouTube, it's all about like, who are you and how do I elevate my status? So like nowadays, I just haven't seen heroes that have acted actually heroic in a long time. So I just wanted to have like, you know, a nerdy high school kid who was put into a position where he could actually be a classic hero, like someone who just does good because he has to. It's in him. It's just he has to hide himself to do it. Like I like that kind of hero storytelling, and I always have, because I think it's archetypal. Like I think that's actually how heroics work. If you're a celebrity and you have a photographer photographing you at the cancer children's hospital, I just don't feel like that's actually heroic. I feel like that's kind of like,
oh no, I know, isn't that like you're right.
It's kind of nice, right? It's kind of nice. The kids are happy. It's kind of nice, but it also,
but it's also like a publicity stunt.
It's kind of dirty. It doesn't feel heroic anyways, but
yeah.
you know, I don't
No,
know.
E-ratic is very cool. E-ratic is, I mean, I feel like it's a very like fresh, modern, like kind of spin on Spider-Man in a way.
Oh yeah, totally Spider-Man influence.
Yeah. Obviously, the Spider-Man influence is there. And I mean, obviously, you know, I don't know what you think or anything, but reading it, I thought, oh, this is someone saying that they're giving us the Spider-Man that either we want or they want.
Because you know what it was is like Spider-Man has been an adult now for decades. Like when I was a kid, he was a grown up and was married and, you know, married to the supermodel, and like that teenage Spider-Man, I guess he's kind of been in the movies like recently, but in the comic space, there's just like Spider-Man isn't a teenager anymore. Like he hasn't been one in a long time. Even the Ultimate Spider-Man now is 20 years old. So like so I wanted a teenage hero in that space that lived in that space. And I think Oliver Leaf is different than Peter Parker in many ways. Oliver Leaf is my erratic teenage real person's name, that character's name. Like where Peter Parker is a bit, especially in the early Stan Lee stuff, pretty resentful and kind of mean. It's pretty funny. Yeah. Those early issues, he's kind of like has a bit of revenge in his heart, a little bit. And I think Stan Lee had a bit of darkness in his heart that he kind of would channel through him, like this kind of like, you know, when you exude love to everyone around you, Jung would say your shadow was probably resentment, right? Like that's so I think we saw a bit of Stan Lee's shadow in Peter Parker. But my Oliver Leaf, he's a bit more like he's growing up in a broken home, and you know his mom has some alcohol problems, and his brother's popular, and like it's just like it's a bit. That's not my life, but it's a bit more my life than maybe Peter Parker was. You know, like I wanted to make a nerd character that people liked. The girls like Oliver Leaf. He's a nerd and he's an outcast, but people like him. Like I just haven't seen that kind of character in a long time, and I wanted to put one out there, and that's what I did. And then the other thing is, like in season 2, I'm really expanding more characters. Like I have this weird idea that if I can create I think the shorthand for success in some ways could be this, and I don't know if this is true, but this is what I'm going with right now. If I could come up with like an imaginary toy line for my character, then inherently I have archetypes to deal with. I have heroes, I have villains, I have supporting characters. And if I can imagine myself as a kid playing with those toys, well, then that's a shortcut to imagine a connection to those characters, and the audience being able to come up with their own ideas. So especially in season 2, I'm coming up with some new characters that would be my imaginary playset of E-ratic. Like if you were getting an action figure line, like what, not that there is an action figure line. I'm just saying, like, as a creative exercise, like what if that was a way to reverse engineer what would be a cool story and cool characters to follow along. So that's kind of what I'm doing.
I think E-ratic would make a cool action figure. And once again, Todd McFarlane, if you were watching, because I know, why wouldn't he be?
Yeah.
Todd Toys could make a erratic line of figures. Why not?
But first, Todd, you need to draw that Spawn Spider-Man 20 pager this
I
month.
feel, but I feel like I heard that he's like going to work at DC or doing something with DC
Oh,
or
probably,
something.
probably.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll see that Spider-Man Spawn thing anytime soon. But damn it, Todd, make it happen in our lifetime because it should happen. I love when like miracle things happen in comic books, like JLA Avengers by George Perez finally
Yeah.
like coming to the light of day. So don't tell me that
Well, listen,
something
Todd
isn't
takes over.
possible.
Todd licenses DC Comics. Todd starts publishing all the DC Comics. Then Todd does a DC Marvel crossover. And in the Todd run DC Comics / Marvel crossover, Todd does the Spawn, Spider-Man, Batman crossover to
Oh my
combine all three
God.
universes. Why not?
And single-handedly reignites the comic book industry. I mean, I feel like it does need something like, I mean, I feel like, in a way, Mark Silvestri is like such an event thing, but I feel kind of the same way about him as you feel about Todd, and I feel the way about Todd. It's like, I mean, great, you made toys and stuff, but it's like you're like one of the greatest comic book artists of your generation, and you haven't drawn a comic book in 10 years. Like, what the hell? And I know he draws. I know he does. Like, I know he's just sitting around drawing. I'm gonna try to interview him, and I'll ask all these
Yeah,
burning
well, the problem is
questions.
he's
But
inking all the time. He's always
yeah,
inking. He's always drawing. You could see it. You could see it in those how to draw videos. I think he sometimes, I don't know. This is me just guessing. It feels like sometimes he's a bit embarrassed about his drawing abilities, but he knows he's a great inker. I think again, it's the flaws that make the art. So maybe technically some artists have a better mannequin or whatever, but I think Todd is at his best when he inks himself. So I would love a little McFarlane,
if
not just the
only,
inking over someone else. But
if only Rob Liefeld could give Todd an ounce of his shamelessness at just putting whatever the hell art out there.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting to have lived through the Image years with all those guys coming up, becoming multimillionaires, transitioning some of them to DC, back to Marvel, and then where they are now. It's like an interesting, like you can really see an arc there of life. That's kind of cool.
I told Eric Larson when I talked to him, and I think that he's kind of realized the Image dream the best out of all of them, because he left to do his own thing, and 30 years later, he's still doing his own thing. You know what I mean?
And he's amazing. He's great.
He is amazing, and he's drawn every single issue of Dragon. There's an absolute collection coming out that's going to be so cool, and it's just like, I think that it's very successful. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh yeah.
he never gave the property to someone else to make. I mean, there was a cartoon and there were toys and stuff like that, but who knows if we'll ever see a Dragon movie or not? But that would be kind of cool. I'm kind of on the fence because it's like luckily I have the ability to completely separate the comics from the movies. Like, I don't feel like one makes or breaks the other one, in my opinion. I mean, in public opinion, I'm sure they do. You know what I mean? For like, especially back in the day, like there were so many like bad superhero movies that really just like left such a bad taste in people's mouth. But I think people are more forgiving these days. You know what I mean? I think.
But wasn't it better when they made bad superhero movies? When they made the bad Captain America movie? When they made the bad Fantastic Four movie? Because it's still like the untapped potential was still in the comic books. So you make a bad movie, but the power is still in the comic books. And then it was like, oh, these comic books are so amazing that they keep making these bad movies. But then as soon as Marvel started making amazing movies off of these comic books, I think they took some of that power from the comic books. They stole the life force, and it's like how do we get it back? How do we get that back? And then you look at the time, like Warren Ellis, Mark Miller, like these guys were doing crazy stuff in Marvel Comics. Like when I broke into Marvel Comics, it was at such a low point. They were just like, they brought in Joe Quesada, and they were like, just do whatever it takes to get sales. And then what did they do? They brought in top tier creators and said, just go crazy. And I think the lesson is there. The lesson is you bring in the biggest talent you can find and let them do wrong things. Let them do the wrong things. Like that's what comic books are for. Comic books are not for a polished, here's the right way to do a thing. That's the movies. The movies, the multi-billion dollar industry, but to really like a spark of life that's in comics is when you just have like top talent just going crazy, not getting paid well, but just having creative fire explode out of their hands onto those pages. And I think we need that right now. Like I
Absolutely.
like here's my theory. Right now, the variant cover market is exploding.
Hmm.
My original art sales for covers are crazy. Why is that? Why did the variant cover market explode? Is it because the only way to make sales is to make 20 covers, and because they're making 20 covers, people are buying them? I don't think so. I think it's because the fire that used to be inside comic books is now on top of comic books. That's where the real top tier is. They're all on the top of comic books. They're not drawing the insides anymore because I think the rates are too low or whatever, takes too much. I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm not quite sure why. But the real reason why variant covers are exploded is because the top tier is on them. And if you can make that top tier, just throw everything out. I would say if I was running Marvel right now, I would say Secret Wars, Destructo Infinity happens now. Boom, like the universe explodes into nothingness. And out of that nothingness, we like just do new things. I don't know, just like new things, or even just like not explain it. If you just didn't explain, didn't even warn people. If 1 month you just like every comic book just changed with no warning, you didn't put it in the ads, you didn't put just every comic book just changed with secret art teams and secret writers, and everyone just did a secret, innovative, crazy, amazing thing out of the blue. Maybe that would just be enough to just be like, oh, this could happen again. Like that fire, that spark of like just renegade art making could happen now. Like, and I think, what if it was secret? That'd be amazing. Not Secret Wars, Secret Comics, and just boom, everything changes. Like, I would love that so much.
It's funny. Something you said earlier made me think that I was so glad to grow up without the internet. Because it's like you said, people like hated Todd McFarlane and stuff. I'm so glad that the internet wasn't there to tell me like whose art was good, whose art was bad, who I should like, and who I should hate. Because yeah, and like the magic of going to the comic book store and like not knowing what was going to be on the cover,
Yeah,
and
right.
like it's like just something shocking, and like yeah, you just can't recapture that. There, yeah. But so,
The
do you mean
surprise.
like? Do you mean just like get rid of Spider-Man, X-Men, and everything, and completely new, fresh characters, like a new universe? Dare I say?
Well, maybe that too. I think. Well, I think there's a lot of power in those characters. So, for instance, if you just did a secret reboot of all the characters, and I don't know how long it has to last. Maybe it's a temporary. If it gets explained later. Maybe there's a fracture in the multiverse, or maybe the Beyonder shows back. I don't know what happens, but explain it later. Explain it later. Don't even announce it. Just in secret, reboot every character all at once. Amazing. That would be amazing. Why not? Like that would just, and then you could always like, maybe a year later, go back to the way that things were if you wanted to, if it didn't work out. But I think we're missing that surprise. Like all we do now is look over the previews and tell the stores what we want to order months in advance. And you look at who's drawing the covers and everything, and nothing's new and nothing's a surprise. And oh, Sylvester's doing a Batman book, but we knew how that deal was from 7 years ago or whatever. Like Spider-Man spawned Batman.
Have
Oh,
you
there's a
lost your
surprise, but
enthusiasm?
like I just, like you said, that novelty, that surprise, like why not get that back? And what a trick to pull on the industry to do it all in secret. That would be so amazing.
That would be amazing. And it
Yeah.
would be so the slap that it deserves too. It's like I feel like there's so many like especially in fandom, everyone has an opinion on how it should work, what's wrong with it, how it should be fixed, and blah blah blah. Yet I don't know. I feel like they're part of the problem. Be part of the solution. You talked about Marvel, like when Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti did Marvel Knights. That was freaking amazing, and that really did inject new life. And it's coming from two professionals who absolutely adored comic books, and
Yeah.
were killing it in their own right. I think it was because of Ash and like Painkiller Jane and stuff like that that might have led to that deal. Um, So, but recently talking to Jim Rugg, I suggested like him and Ed Piskor like maybe need to come in and do Marvel Knights 2.0, or maybe someone like you know, just some visionary, like, you know, like, I don't know what, obviously you would probably want to handle Spider-Man, but, you know, you're doing the main Spider-Man book and you're bringing in like, you know, great artists and writers and stuff who, you know, to do. I know, because it's weird, because like Marvel Knights, I guess that wasn't. I hate continuity. Like it's so hard to figure that out. I don't feel beholden to continuity. I kind of like the idea of DC like just doing like, because it, like you say, like the reboots and stuff like that, and it does go to show that like every time they do a reboot, you know, there's a lot of rebooting, but then there's a lot of bringing it back to the you know, status quo at the end of the day. And it just goes to show that they are such great characters with such limitless possibilities. And there's so many ways to keep them fresh. And, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but, you know, I think that a lot of things that you said are, you know, definitely ways to get excitement. Yeah, like be shocking, do something
Yeah,
different. You know what I
you
mean?
need that renegade spirit back in comics. And it's like you just need the trick. The trick is how to do it. So I think a secret, not a planned reboot. A planned reboot, we're all bored of those. They're horrible and they're too safe. But a secret reboot could give that spirit, or something else could happen. There could be some actual, I don't know, you know, and we're all sick of events, but what if there was something happened? Just you need a trick. You need a trick to get that renegade spirit back into comic books. And the trick that Marvel had during Marvel Knights was Marvel was in bankruptcy. That was the actual trick. And it was just like and it was like, you know, empowering Joe to open up his phone book and Jimmy to open up their phone books and just call the cool people that they knew, just like, hey, you can just do whatever you want. Like we're just going crazy. Like that's really what you need right now, because the purpose of art in a philosophical social mechanism is if you don't have an art in a society, it ossifies and stagnates and calcifies and locks up. And the art should always be challenging the status quo, because it's the lubrication of life. So if you don't have art, you're just going to lock up at seas and die. If you have too much art, you don't have any structure. It's Bohemian Grove. It's whatever. It's the island of it's Caligula. It's just too crazy. You need both. But right now we have too much structure, and right now that structure is Hollywood, and it's like the visual artists have been depowered. The language artists are all, I think, vying for position in that hierarchy. But the hierarchy is like seizing up. Like you can feel it grinding to a halt. And like even in film, like where's the new Tarantino? There isn't one. It's like everything is it's just it's the right time for big changes. It's the right time for like new voices, or even voices that aren't new but would be new. Like this happens all the time where you have an established artist or writer. What is Marvel Knights? You had established guys that were just given the keys, like do something crazy with Punisher, do something crazy with Ghost Rider in a new way. Just it needs to be different. It needs to make it mark. Like it's the right time for a creative explosion to happen again. And I think it's going to happen. I just don't know. I can't tell you when or how or why, but I think
It
we're
does
primed for it.
feel like it is maybe at a breaking point a little bit, because art is very, you know, reactionary. So, you know, something's got to give at some point. It's funny because most of the comics that I love are the ones I grew up with, but I don't read a lot of like DC and Marvel anymore. Every once in a while, I'll pick something up that's, you know, fun or exciting or whatever. But I'm finding a lot of great like underground indie comics and like Kickstarter kind of comic books are like some of the best comic books out there. Like some really, really great art that is just like what you say, like, you know, sort of shocking and limit pushing and just exciting, you know. So
Yeah, I think crowdfunding comics are really interesting to me, like really interesting. I think for me, the biggest, here's what's really weird is you could have in crowdfunding $1 million+ comic book, huge success, with backers under 5,000 backers. Now, if you had a comic book, if you had a Marvel comic book with under 5,000 backers, I don't even know if they'd publish it. Like, it would, maybe they would today, I don't know, but it would not be considered a success. But in the crowdfunding model, that's a huge success. And it's like, I remember reading a long time ago that the new economy would be a boutique economy and not a mass economy, where like every musician, every artist, everyone would be playing to smaller crowds, but those crowds would be very niche and very boutique. And like, crowdfunding is that. The thing that crowdfunding lacks, or the danger, is the dependability, the regularity. Like, it's like creative people trying to ship comics on time and deal with like the business side. Is for each separate title has its own creative team trying to handle those problems on their own. That's what needs to be cracked. But at least for a stopgap, yeah, I see so much energy in the crowdfunding space. Like, I've thought about doing one myself. I don't have any time, but if I thought, that might be something to do, like just to try, just to have fun with, and just go crazy, do something nutty, like,
But but the only thing I don't like about it, I feel like it sort of limits your audience in a way. Like, if you hadn't gotten in on the Kickstarter, then you snooze, you lose, and then you're just sort of, I mean, potentially with resells and stuff, you could get more readers, but I just think, it's sort of finite in that way. I mean,
the cool thing about comics is you could walk into the shop and by surprise stumble across, some new comic book, pick it up, go home, and then go back and buy all the issues. So it does miss that. It doesn't have the distribution doesn't have that worked out. I don't know, but it's at least it's like the overspill. It's like the industry has contracted too much. The comic industry has artificially contracted too much, where now there's this overspill of creativity, and the overspill is being collected in crowdfunding. So if there are more shops open, if you could buy them at drugstores when you and I were kids or whatever, that's enough to maintain all that stuff. But because the industry has contracted so much, the overspill is happening into the crowdfunding markets. And I can't figure out if that's good or bad, but it's definitely good in that there's a space for some of that overspill to make things. And I think that in life, you can either make or corrupt. And goodness does not corrupt. Only evil corrupts. So if you want to make the world a better place, it doesn't matter what you make, but make something. Because just that human idea of creation is goodness. And how do you fight the evil? There's so much crazy evil in this world right now. Like, you can just feel it. You can feel that evil seeping through society. You can feel it seeping through your front door, coming through the internet, all globally. Just like the world feels like corrupted right now. It feels like dirty and corrupted. And if you ever feel yourself corrupting something, here's a note for creatives. If you are on a property, if you're given a property, if you're given an X-Men and you're writing it or drawing it, there is a joy in destruction. There's a real creative joy in like kicking down a sandcastle. There really is. Like, kids don't kick down snowmen and sandcastles because they're evil people. There's just a joy in it. But if you're not rebuilding along after you kick over, if all you're doing is kicking over, you're actually contributing to the corruption of culture and art and the world. But the creative process demands, like a phoenix, it demands a rebirth. So if you don't have an embedded rebirth in your writing or your art, you're probably not making art. You're probably just kicking over sandcastles. You're probably just that snot-nosed kid. But if you're kicking over sandcastle and building something new, well, okay, that makes sense. That's creation. That's the cycle of art. But you need that embedded rebirth. You need to create things. You need to build back. You need to grow again. You need to rebirth like the phoenix. And if you're missing that in your art, you need to recalibrate what you're doing, because you need, like, corruption is intoxicating, but it's small and it goes away and it gets you attention, but then people turn on you. Like, you need to create If all you're doing is corrupting, it's you're not contributing. You need to build, create.
It's so funny because I think of like times when high profile writers have come into comic books and arguably out of the love of comic books, and I feel like they did more harm than good, like by Brad Meltzer's Identity Crisis. All he really did was shit all over like beloved characters, and I arguably creating a compelling story or whatever, but you're right, like he was drawn to that corruption. Like it's cool to do something edgy and awful or whatever, but all you did is like create this horrible story with no like building up, you know what I mean? Or J. Michael Straczynski like having Gwen Stacy have illegitimate children with Norman Osborn. Like that was horrible. Like this is what you like. This is the legacy you want to leave for comic books, and like it doesn't make sense to me. So I think.
Oh, go ahead.
No, what you said is very like profound and meaningful in a lot of ways. Like,
well, I mean, I gotta tell you, there's so much. When I wrote and drew Iron Fist for a couple years and year and a half, something like that, 12 issues, something like that, and I wanted to kill Iron Fist when I started. I thought like, oh, that's great. Like, I just had this urge. I had this creative urge because you do like the first thing you want to do when you want to like I want to make my mark. I want to do things new. And doing things new involves destroying what's there. Like you can't do a thing a new way without destroying the way it's done. Right. It's embedded into it. And I had this real urge to like just put Danny Rand on this like path. I thought it would be spiritually for myself, creatively, just create this arc of an amazing death. Like how could I just have because I think embedded in the hero archetype is self-sacrifice, and self-sacrifice involves the death of yourself for the greater good. Like I do think that's the heroic journey. But as I was doing it, I did feel this like voice being like, this is not the way. Like this is not what this character needs. This is only part of it, because what comes with that self-sacrifice, if you look at the world through religious archetypes, the self-sacrifice for others is followed by reincarnation, by a rebirth. And it was a real lesson to me as I was doing it, that character demanded to be saved. And that character the archetype of the story demanded at the end of Iron Fist that he be reborn as his true self. And then it was like, oh, that's the urge I had to destroy the character was actually the urge to embrace the archetype of reincarnation. The true heroic journey is not here to here. It's like a circle. And it involves the rebirth and the reincarnation every time. So I think maybe if you're a writer and maybe your run is cut short before you can do that, or maybe you don't do it on your own. Maybe you just have missed that last step. But I feel creatively, you can do anything you want to these characters as long as it comes with that final act of true heroic archetypes: reincarnation, rebirth, reinvigoration. You attack the ossification of the machine so the machine works again. Not to destroy the machine and start all over. You like the lubrication of art is life, and life is not a dead end. Life creates life. And if you're not life creating life, if you're only creating death, well, guess what? That's again, technically satanic, like technically an inversion of life. And again, I'm a Canadian. We're not religious at all. I'm talking about things in technical terms here. And you can see right now in a lot of bad narratives, only inversion without the reincarnation. So you only see corruption. You're only corrupting this character for a purpose, a greater good. You're only corrupting that storyline for a greater good, or just as a selfish, not even selfish. I think it's unaware. You're just destroying and attacking because it's fun and it's creative, but it will leave you dead and empty unless you come out of it with a rebirth. And that's what I learned in Iron Fist was I needed to save Danny Rand at the end and have him come out. And I finished that story very purposely with the seed of new adventures that maybe the reader could follow in their head. So even when I'm gone, and if it takes, because they hadn't made an Iron Fist comic in 8 years. If it took another 8 years to make an Iron Fist comic book, the fan of that character could continue on with his adventures in their own mind. That's what I really wanted to do there. But it was an interesting lesson to like go. I wasn't aware of it when I was doing it. I was just following the artistic urge, but I became aware as I was doing it, what I was doing. And I became aware because this part of me was like, you need to just save him at the end. So that's what I tried to do.
Well, I loved your art on Iron Fist. I thought it was a really good series. So I think, would you ever want to revisit the character at this point, or?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I love all these characters.
Is there one like character that you haven't done yet that you're really itching to do in a grand big way, or?
Well, I've always wanted to do a Batman book, and I was talking with DC about doing one.
Well, you absolutely should. I mean, it would be.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem is that like I wanted to do one, and then everyone started doing Batman books, and now all they're making are Batman books, and it's just that it just killed any. I mean, I still love that character. I want to do one at some point, but now it's just so oversaturated. It's like there's no urge left to do one. So I think when things calm down at some point in the future, when people have stopped, when there's not 50 books a month of Batman, like that'd be the time to do.
It's true. Yeah. I guess you wouldn't want it to come out right now during Mark Silvestri's big event book.
Well, if it was just Silvestri, I would love that. I mean, I'm so competitive. I would love to like throw me Jim Lee X-Men and then unleash me on X-Men Gold. And then I would just, what a treat it would be to like head-to-head compete against, like put McFarlane on Spider-Man Spawn and then put me on Spawn Spider-Man. I would love, it would be so creatively invigorating to just compete with these people I love so much. Like what a joy that would be. But if 100 people are doing Spawn Spider-Man, well,
I like to consider myself as not having a very firm grasp on reality. So I always have these fantasy projects in mind. Yeah. And the one that just sprang to mind would be to have you and Chris Claremont team up for an X-Men story, as if Chris stayed on the X-Men after issue 3 instead of leaving. Like, he's doing all these great miniseries now. The Gambit one is really good. I'm looking forward to the Extreme X-Men one. And so I just feel like some of my favorite artists, like I'm sad that they have never, like, we don't have like a Claremont collaboration with them, just because I love like the X-Men annuals with Art Adams and his collaborations with just like all of my favorite artists. And so I just always think it would be fun to see like something like that happen.
Oh yeah
Kaare Andrews and Chris Claremont on X-Men Gold. You heard it here first.
Done. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I feel aside from Astonishing X-Men and I guess Ultimate X-Men, have you ever done a run interiors X-Men? Like,
no. I did Astonishing X-Men with Warren. But I feel like that was one of my stumbles artistically. Like, you have these, I was trying, like every time, like I said, I always feel like I'm brand new at this job. And every time it's like, oh my goodness, what? And I think part of it is because I just want to do things in new ways all the time. So, and to do things in new ways, I always try new things. And so with E-ratic, I'm trying a bunch of new things, and like the way I'm handling backgrounds is a new thing. And like, some people don't like it and some people do, but it's like a new thing. And it's part of the reason why I'm doing it. And with Astonishing X-Men, I was trying some new things that I don't think quite worked. I think I was getting into a groove near the end, but it was not, that was also like there were some personal issues around that time that were seeping into deadlines. And it was like, that was a tough run. I don't feel like I I feel like that was a bit of a stumble creatively, a bit of a stumble.
Well, I enjoyed it. So
Oh, thanks.
if it makes you feel any better. But, I mean, you'll have that, it's interesting, I guess, to look back at your career and, the whys and wherefores. You said, there were personal issues seeping in and stuff like that. So, the reader doesn't know that. But that it once again ties into the soul and the magic of art, like it's all affected by certain things like that. It's funny, I mentioned the X-Men, like assuming you're even an X-Men fan, but you must be, right, to an extent.
Yeah. Totally.
Because I mean, well, and then you did Spider-Man Reign, but and then you did I think you did a story for Tangled Web.
Yeah, I did Tangled Web before Spider-Man Reign, actually.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So we need like a good, like traditional, like Spider-Man story from you then to fulfill your.
I've had this urge. I've had a real Spider-Man urge growing in me because I've always connected to that character the most. I don't know, personally, because he's not like, it's hard for me to connect to Superman. Like, oh, you're born a god and like now you're gonna help the little Earth people on Earth. Like, I don't creatively, like, I don't think that way as a person. So how do I? It would be a challenge that I would have probably liked to do at some point, but inherently, like, orphan Peter Parker, nerd at school, but can do amazing things that no one can find out about. Like, it's like, oh, that just seems like life to me. Like, I can relate to that so instantly. That kind of a character didn't have money, but he can do these things he can't tell people about. He could use them to, like, steal money or become rich, but he's trying to help people, and he doesn't always succeed. He falls on his face half the time. He hurts the people he loves. Like, this is, to me, like, that's like, oh, that's just how it is. Like, I could tangle with those ideas forever. The true virtue character, I just feel so too much of an I don't know, too far removed from humanity to me. But Batman, again, tragic character, a lot of flaws. Give me characters with flaws. Like, that's life for me,
It's funny. I know this girl, and she's not into comics at all or whatever. And we were talking about what superpower you would want to have, and I said, well, obviously Superman, just because he has every powerful, power imaginable. And she was like, I'd want to be Batman, and I was like, oh my god, that's so like pedestrian, lame answer. I'm just like he doesn't have any powers. I'm like, he has scars on his back. I'm like, he probably has bad knees. I'm like, why would you want to be Batman? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. Well, his
but
superpower
it's just because he's more appealing to people because he's so cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but his superpower is also like, it's very relatable. It's like he has the superpower of wealth. Wealth and revenge. That's
the real superpower on this planet. So there you go.
Wealth is the real superpower. I find Tony Stark fascinating because here's a character who, the movie version of Tony Stark is fascinating to me because here's a character who, in the movies, his hero's journey was not. His hero's journey was to realize that he was the hero all along. He was already super smart. He was already super wealthy. He was already designing technology. His hero's arc was really just to realize he was already amazing. Like, to me, that's such an interesting modern experience that is given to us through things like Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. Like that idea that you're already a hero and you don't really have to work for anything. You don't really have to overcome anything other than just to realize you're already the genius, rich, successful, like a billionaire playboy. Like, it's such an interesting, I think it's a reflection of society at the moment or a mere moments ago, because he's not really around anymore. But when that happened, it was like an interesting reflection of how society was 10 years ago or whenever that movie first came out. Like, I thought that was really revealing psychologically for society. Like, that was who society chose right then to be the biggest hero on the planet, was like, someone who who didn't really have to overcome anything other than maybe his own doubts. It was very strange.
But it's like, but is it so fresh and modern? I mean, didn't Glenda tell Dorothy way back when, you had it in you all
there you go.
you know?
Yeah. No, you're
So
right. You're
it's
right.
like,
You're right.
that's so like telling and metaphorical of life. It's like we go through life looking for something, and all we have to do is look down at our feet and know it's been there all along.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is,
I think that
I
the
guess you
twist
have
with
to,
Tony Stark was he was also rich. He was also
true, true.
he also didn't like it wasn't like don't you had the lessons, you have everything you need. The lesson was like you actually do have more than anyone else, and you have everything. It was a very strange, but you're right. It is if you look at it that way, it is a bit of a Dorothy archetype. That's interesting. I like that.
But now I want to see an Iron Man series by you.
Yeah, no, it'd be fun. It'd be fun. I did, when I first started breaking into Marvel, I did like 3 Iron Man covers very early on, and I think I almost ended up doing a Iron Fist, or sorry, Iron Man book with Harlan Ellison. He
Oh
like
wow.
called me out of the blue one day. I'd never. He's like, "This is Harlan Ellison." I was like, I want to do a book with you at Marvel. It was like he was going to do a Marvel book, and he, for some reason, he saw a cover or something I did and wanted me to try. It was a very strange, bizarre experience because I had just broken in, had no track record, and all of a sudden I got a weird phone call from Harlan Ellison, like of all people, telling me he was going to do a Marvel book and I was going to draw it. And it never happened. I don't know.
I
That's
was
the
gonna
one
say,
phone
and
call I
you
had.
said yes and never heard from him again.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to it, but it was just such a strange, bizarre phone call. Yeah.
What an interesting footnote, though, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Who knows what that would have been like? I don't know. I mean, he's one of those crazy. He's one of those crazy renegade artistic renegades. Like he's
Yeah.
always been a comic book fan. Ellison, he has an auction right now on Heritage Auctions with his comic art and that he's collected, and it's that same renegade spirit that thrives in comic books, like just like that big fu, like creativity, like that's the sauce, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because with social media and everything, it's like I feel like you're not required, but I think it helps a lot if you want to grow your audience to have either a Twitter presence or some sort of online presence and, engage with your fans. And, but sometimes, like there's just super freaky geniuses who just are socially awkward and, um, say the wrong things and are, people you probably wouldn't want to be in the same room with, but they
Yeah,
make the most brilliant art, you know what I mean? So
yeah. Oh
I
no,
think,
I think it's more the rule that the genius comes with that. Like it's more the rule. That's again, that's why I think we're in a horrible contradiction right now, because you're not allowed to be different. And if you are, you're thrown off the ship, especially if you're a writer. Like artists can kind of get away with it because when you draw something, it's not words. And right now, words are so overcharged with politics. Like if you write the wrong thing, you will be destroyed. But if you draw the wrong thing, maybe you just get censored off Instagram. Like it's a very strange, divisive thing. But I don't know. It's a very weird place to live. But I also have noticed more and more artists are off of Twitter and Facebook, and maybe they're still on Instagram, but Instagram is trying to turn it into TikTok. Like I do see I do see artists retreating a little bit from social media, I think.
and I think there's something to be said about like letting the work speak for itself sometimes, you know what I mean? Or just, it's like I talk about growing up without the internet. It's like we didn't have access to people. Like, I mean, in a way, it's a good thing. It's like thank God I can stalk people and reach out to them for interviews and stuff like that. But they can say yes or no if they want to. But it's like just because you create a comic book or whatever, it's like and I read your comic book, I don't know you. You know what I mean? It's like you're still a person with a life or whatever. And it's like, I feel like, I mean, you should definitely call out artists and writers and stuff for like horrifying behavior if necessary. But you also do have to separate the art from the artist to an extent and just sort of be able to enjoy their art without, making them accountable as a human being. We're all human beings full of flaws and, you know, emotions and potential for just as much good and evil as anyone else. So it's like the the lack of empathy is what bothers me.
What I also find interesting about social media is it like if you go on YouTube, I've heard this a few times lately. Some of the YouTubers who are becoming more prominent in the comic book field, not creators, but like commentators, they all started off just reviewing comic books. At least I keep hearing that from them. Um, and I've heard this a few times now where they say, well, my audience really exploded when I wrote my FU Tom King video or whatever it was. So insert creator there, and it was like, I feel like you know that social media already um, lifts up conflict because just as people, we are drawn to conflict because we have to be aware of danger. So if there's two people fighting on the street, you will look there no matter what's going on over here. There could be, you know, beautiful person to your right, but if two people are fist fighting to your left, you'll have to look at them because you just need to be aware for your own safety and your family's safety. And social media is the same thing. It's always done that. Facebook has been open about like they know conflict generates views and clicks and interest. And I have this growing suspicion that YouTube not just knows that, but they are algorithmically uplifting conflict. And what has turned all these reviewers who may have written videos about the love of an issue or the love of this, or the love of that. Oh, I didn't like this one, but I like this one. I feel like the algorithm is not rewarding that and when they have really attacked people and maybe righteously, maybe there was some creative missteps or whatever, someone's being obnoxious or whatever, and they wrote that scolding video scolding them. I think algorithmically their videos exploded. And so now they're being rewarded. And I don't know if this is true. This is a new idea, but it feels like it's true that the people who loved comic books and reviewing them honestly found real YouTube success in just attacking works and material. And this is not just comic books, film too. I get sent so many, maybe just the indication of what I watch, but I get sent so many like videos from YouTube of like people attacking movies or attacking comic books or attacking this person or attacking that person. I feel like YouTube, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like it is. I feel like it's creating division intentionally in a demographic of society. And I don't know if that's just to get attention, because I know that division does get attention, conflict does get attention. Or if I've had weird ideas lately, like what if there was other motivations behind it? What if it's just narratively speaking, if I was Dr. Doom and I wanted to destabilize society a little bit, well, why not just buy YouTube and then algorithmically lift up the conflict? Like it would do both things. Uplift the conflict, fracture groups of people and in the things they love, and just like make people see that all the time. Like I really feel like YouTube is doing that intentionally or not. Like I feel like it's like almost like a supervillain dividing people.
You know, in a way, like, and I, you know, as a YouTube partner, I wouldn't want to disparage them, but I see a lot of truth in what you're saying. And it's not just YouTube, though. It's like, you know, it's proven actually, like in Instagram, that like Instagram is terrible for female body image issues, you know, and it's like, yeah, it definitely does a lot of harm. And I said to somebody, and I 100% believe it, like my own YouTube channel would be 100% more successful if I did negative reviews and reported on like conflicts in the industry or just, but I refuse. I love comic books. The reason I wanted to do this channel is to preserve the memory and history of it and just celebrate my pure love and joy for it. You know, I had been wanting to do one, and like at the beginning of the pandemic with all the downtime, it seemed like a perfect time to start. But it was actually a good reminder, just like revisiting all these old comics and artists that meant so much to me and loved me. It's like it made me realize just how important comic books were to me, and what a comfort zone and what a source of joy and inspiration they have and always have been, and they always will be for me. So I'm not going to shit on that by creating some negative YouTube channel that is sensationalistic just to get more views and money.
Clicks,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's great. Yeah, I think you're doing a great job, and Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg are doing a great job. Like, we're kind of missing right now. We're missing that cohesion that we're missing with Wizard Magazine. We're missing that comic book buyer's guide of our time. You know, like in the community of comic books, we don't really have that propaganda. It maybe is a bad word, but we don't really have that coalition of good feel good stories about like you look at the comic sites, the news sites, whatever they are, they're full of negativity, and probably because those articles are getting bigger clicks. Like you know that negativity will generate clicks, and clicks generate ad revenue. But I do think it's like I said earlier, I think how you can define evil and good is one corrupts and one creates. And you know, if you're celebrating comics, you are creating celebration. You're creating good feelings about something you love. I think that's inherently good. And if you are attacking people, even if it's justifiable, you are kind of adding to the corruption of I think ultimately in the industry. Unless, so maybe if if you're a YouTuber who's continually attacking, maybe you can balance it with creating. Maybe you can find a balance, a yin and yang. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that most YouTube commentators in comic books started out as reviewers. And the reviews, I remember at the time when the reviews were like the thing, when everyone was reviewing comic books, and it was like kind of fun to like just read reviews all the time and then read the book and, you know, see what you thought. Like, but that's kind of gone away a little bit. I don't know.
There are a few good comic book channels out there, but I know there seems to be a lot of people just jumping on the bandwagon and reporting negativity and stuff. And you know, I don't feel any connection to that community whatsoever. So you find your own, you know, positive people to surround yourself with. I know a lot of artists who love comics and art just as much as I do. And, you know, we talk about Kirby Crackle, we talk about, you know, inking and crow quill pens and, you know, just every stupid little fun thing about comic books. So yeah, hopefully because comics should be a positive thing. I mean, comic books taught me how to read. Comic books gave me a bigger vocabulary. Comic books gave me a broader view of the world. And those are the good things about comic books that need to be celebrated, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So you said,
listen, I even watched some of those other channels, but I just found it interesting. I found this an interesting observation. I don't know if it's wrong for them to do it. I found it interesting anyways.
Yeah, I do. I know. I go back and forth because some of it is interesting and unavoidable, and you do kind of want to, like, it's so crazy. You just do want to know what's going on. But then sometimes I'll be watching it and I'll be like, wow, this person is just really negative and just creating, you know, destruction for no reason. And
right,
you know,
but maybe it's that same here's archetype where it's like you can destroy as long as you create. Like, you know, you can tear down as long as you build up. Like you can be part of the whole of the cycle, not just part of the maybe that's just what I feel could be the answer to some of the, but again, the algorithm is like, I think the algorithm is artificially elevating the part of the cycle that is the destruction, the destroyer. That's my feeling, is like people are getting artificially channeled towards division. I feel it like in just society right now. I feel like society is like, we're being pit against each other in like every way possible, from culture to pop culture to news to politics to ideology to like school to education to whatever it is, to like, you know, Walmart, whatever it is. I feel like this real like sense of like we're under attack. So that's what it feels like to me. We're under like some kind of spiritual warfare or demonic attack or something like that.
Well, I mean, every society historically has fallen. Perhaps this is the beginning of the end for us. I don't know.
Maybe, but then also every society feels like they are the society that will fall. Like I think if you look historically, every every person in their own time feels like they're the one that will have the nuclear war. They're the one that will have the collapse. They're the one that will have the flood. They're the one that will have the whatever it is. So I think that also just the anxiety of life is the you know, that the death is around the corner. I don't know. Who
Well,
knows?
I've always been a sucker for the worst case scenario, so bring it on. I'm
Yeah,
just kidding.
totally.
I don't
Totally.
know. I know. Yeah, it's true. I don't, because I think it's our ego. You know, it's like we think that we're so important and significant that, of course, we're going to see the end of life as we know it in our lifetime. Because how could we not? You know what I mean? We're a part of this.
Yeah. But you
So,
like I'm taking the opposite position right now. These days I feel like we've always been told, oh, it's because we think we're the most important thing, and we're just a little speck of dust in an infinite collection of dust. But what here's the question: what if we were the most important thing? Like, what if you were the most important thing? What if I was the most important thing? What if we flipped it? What if we flipped that message? Like, how would it change our lives if all of a sudden we were not just one of 80 billion people or whatever? I don't even know the population of Earth right now. It's a lot. In an infinite vacuum of space with infinite planets, and we actually meant nothing, and we're just no greater importance than a rock orbiting Earth, an asteroid. Like, what if it was flipped? What if humanity was actually the most important thing we could experience? And what if you were the most important thing you could experience? How would that change human behavior? I think it would help. I'm at the position now where I feel like we have devalued ourselves so much that we have become corrupted by our own sense that we are worthless in a vacuum of worthlessness. And the only way to have importance is to become less worthless than the other people who are also worthless. Like if you are already the most important thing in the universe, I think it would help people. I think people would feel emboldened to help others. I think it would help. I think we would live life full. I think we would love more. I think we would, like, I think there's something there that I can't put my finger on, but I've been playing with in my head that the way to attack life is to say, I matter, I'm important, you matter, you're important. We are the most important things in this universe. Now go. Now, what would you do? If you really were the most important thing, you would help as many people as you could. You would spread as much love as you could. You would, because it would be your responsibility. In a heroic archetype, if you were the most important thing in your universe, it would be your responsibility to lift everyone else up, to help everyone, to do as much as you could, to fulfill everything. I think there's something there that I can't, and again, maybe this is a deficit because I'm Canadian, and in Canada we don't have religion. Maybe I'm just grasping on some pre-established fringes of other spiritual territories, but I feel like there's something there that is like unexplored that I'm really interested in right now. I don't know.
Maybe you just answered the question about Superman and made him interesting. Maybe he does know he's the most important thing in the world, and that's why he lifts people up and does all this good.
Well, I
But
think
then
that's probably why his archetype is valuable. If you look at like he's one of the most recognized people in existence in modern society. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's that we are all gods and stewards of the rest of humanity. Maybe there is something there.
I mean,
I don't know.
thematically speaking, either way, you're laying the groundwork for your next bitch in comic book, right?
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about comic books is I can take all these weird ideas that flutter in my brain, and if I didn't have comic books or directing or whatever, if I didn't have a creative expression, I don't know what I would do with this weird nonsense in my head. But I like to just like put it into a narrative form, because then I can explore. Not even, I couldn't even like to judge these ideas because maybe they're valid, maybe they're not. But I just like them. So if I can put them in a narrative form, I get to play with them and see how they play out. And to me, that's the best part of writing comic books anyways, is like narratively playing around with the weird ideas that creep in and out of your consciousness. And where do they come from? Like, where do ideas come from? I don't know. Why do I think these weird things? I don't know. Someone didn't tell me them. They just kind of like manifest. So I just think that's like, it's like, I can't imagine not having that outlet of just like, making stuff.
Yeah, well, luckily you have several platforms to exercise your demons.
Yeah. But listen, you said it right. Exercise your demons. Like, why did you say that? Why did you choose that phrasing? Like, I don't know. Like, it's like if you really think about all these weird little things, like that makes sense when you say it that way. Why does it make sense for me to play ideas narratively? Why does that make sense that we can refer to that as exercising demons, like getting rid of darkness from your body that may be controlling you? Like, what is that? I don't know what that is.
Because that's what life is. It's like, it's not, it's so cliche, but it's so true. It's like, you get from point A to point B, and, it's how you get there, I guess. It's about the life experience. It's about living and learning and growing. And you know what I mean? Like, exercising demon obviously is like trying to figure something out.
Yeah. But
it's funny,
right? If exercising demons is figuring something out, then not figuring it out would be akin to demonic possession. Like, figuring something out is exercising the demons that are controlling you. So not figuring something out would mean you're not even in control of your own life. Like, isn't that weird?
It is weird. And it's like, it's complicated and yet sublimely simple at the same time, right? I mean, it's like, like you talk about creation and destruction. Like, I can see why you were drawn to, Iron Man. You're obviously very into the yin and yang of life. So it's like,
I think it's like superhero comics, right? Good versus evil,
light and dark, good and bad. It's like,
good and bad. And the cool thing about yin and yang is it's a complete circle. It's a unit. It's divided in half, but it's not a static half. It's a division in motion, right? They're twisting shapes in motion. And then in a little bit of good has to be some evil, in a little bit of white has to be some dark, and in a little bit of dark has to be some white. And that is the essence of existence summed up in the most simplest form, because without the white, you couldn't see the black. Without the black, you couldn't register the white. And it's not static, it's in motion. And within each is the other. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
There's something there. I think we figured it all out.
We figured everything out. We figured it all out. But then the superhero comic books are that. It's the motion of good and evil. And in your flawed heroes, they're trying to do good. There has a little bit of bad. Your best villains are doing evil, but there's a little bit of good. It's like, that is, I don't know. That's what comic books are to me. They really are that yin yang reduction of life experience. That's why I love them. They're really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that appeals to me, definitely, for sure. And I think that, you do have to have that balance in comic books. And I think, it's like you said, like, you want to see something new and fresh. And I think that's the key to the true success, is like, it would have something new and fresh, but still have like that sort of like yin yang sort of constant thing that comics
the new and
need
fresh
at
is
the base of it.
Yeah, it's not throwing away the old. It's like, why McFarlane, when he took over Spider-Man, that character had existed for 20 years or whatever, longer than that, 25 years, whatever. Like, so he reinvigorated that existing archetype with new ideas. And I think that's the thing that's amazing. So the cool thing Advantage Marvel and DC have is they have these archetypes, these ideas, these machines ready for reinvigoration. Now all they need is the reinvigoration. So now all we need is the new ideas. And so I think, let's go. Let's do it. Let's get the machines going again. They're getting clogged up. It's time for the lubrication of life to get in there. Get it
Well,
going.
while Batman is sitting in over exploitation, you can jump on your Spider-Man magnum opus and instill all of these great themes that we talked about here today.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So before we go, is there anything projects you want to talk about? You said you're directing. Does that mean like when you're directing, you're not necessarily working on comics? Although I do see you have some comic stuff coming out right now. So
Yeah. So how my weird life works is if I'm in pre-production or developing, I can work on comics simultaneously and uninterrupted. And then if something kicks over to production, then I have to hard stop comics for a small period of time. And then when that project is done with, I can jump back in immediately. So I'm always kind of like jumping back and forth. But Erratic season 2, number 2 just hit the stands. I was actually working on that before this latest directing thing came along, and then for the directing I had to hard stop, and now that's resolving itself. So now I'm opening up the valve of comic books again. So there'll be some covers coming up. There'll be this Erratic season 2 coming up. That'll be a 4-issue thing when it's all said and done. Some directing stuff is coming up, and it's like all kind of like the dance of a creative life. If you're curious what I'm working on, the best place to find me is just Instagram. I have an Instagram account that I just try to just stay completely comics. Every now and then I let a little film thing slip in there, but I try to make it just comics, and I try to make it just the art. I find if I start trying to express written ideas in there, it just dilutes the art. So I just want my art to be on Instagram and my crazy ideas in my crazy stories or a crazy podcast. That's
there you
go.
Yeah. Well, I love all your art and everything you do, and I'm so glad that you didn't completely abandon comic books for Hollywood.
Like, how could you? It's like if it's in your blood, it's like it's like a different thing. It's just,
Yeah, I feel so much like the age of the superstar artist is kind of gone, but I feel like you're sort of a hanger on in that era. So it's always fun and good when Kaare Andrews is back doing comic books. So I continue to read your stuff and look for everything great. And I really thank you for taking your time to talk to me today and for all the great insight on life, comics, and chaos and destruction.
I love it. I like that.
Creation.
Like that.
So
all right, Michael, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great day and keep on keeping on. Thanks, Kaare.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.